welcome to English Language Magazine. I am Khalil. My guest today is Maimouna Mills. She's a radio and television host in the U.S. Good morning, Maimouna.
Good morning to you, Khalil.
Thank you for having accepted our invitation.
Thank you for having me here today. I appreciate it.
Our pleasure. Maimouna, tell us what you do in the States. You work on the radio and you're
television.
also on TV.
Yes. So, I work for Voice of America, but of course, as we always say, I'm here on my own behalf, especially since I'm home and I'm on vacation.
And I must say you're from Senegal.
I am from Senegal, yes. Yeah. I am Ndiaye.
Yes.
And I've been in the U.S. since 1986, and I started as a radio journalist at Voice of America, which I'm still doing. I like to say I sit between two chairs. And in 1991, I started hosting the first ever interactive satellite program between Washington and the African continent. Unfortunately, the program is only in English, so it only goes to African English-speaking African countries. It's a live program every Thursday for 1 hour. I have guests in the studio in Washington, and then we open the phone lines, and people call. We get calls from all over the continent, but also from Europe, from Asia, from the Middle East, basically anybody who has a satellite dish. And also we partner with African stations. We have about 27 stations, and people watch it on their local stations, and they can call us also and participate. It's a very lively format in the sense that because we tackle political, social, economic issues, human rights, women's issues and whatnot, I think the main gist of the program is just to spark debate and also to enable people to have access to decision makers, especially in the U.S., whom they would not ordinarily be able to dialogue with. And also, it's quite interesting for the Americans so that they can actually hear what Africans think, where they're going, and what they want the relationship to be.
And the program is called?
Africa Journal.
Africa Journal.
Yes.
You're watching English Language Magazine, coming from our studios in Dakar. And my guest today is Maimouna Mills. Maimouna, you told us about Africa Journal, but we know that you do other things in video and television.
Yes, I certainly do. And also one of the things I'm very active in is the National Association of Black Journalists, which is, of course, the African-American journalists there.
I almost was.
You almost joined it. You should join it. I encourage you to do that, Khalil, because it's a very important organization. It's called National Association of Black Journalists, but all of us who work there can actually join, and we're almost 3,000 members. And you might imagine that we share a lot of the same feelings and challenges, especially when it comes to working in the mainstream American media. And within the NABJ, we have a World Affairs Committee, and in that we try a lot to highlight African issues. We try to have good press for Africa, because you and I know we've talked about it over the years. The image of Africa in the West in general and in the U.S. is so bad that it breaks our hearts as Africans working there to see that all the time. And I might say, without beating my own drum, that the NABJ gave me an award last year, Salute to Excellence Award, for my work. And it encouraged me because it also, the award was really for a program I did, Africa Journal, on the ties between Africans and African Americans. So it showed to me that African Americans are very interested in that image of Africa in their own country. And so I try to work with different segments of the American population just to boost that image of Africa. For instance, I work with the Corporate Council on Africa, which is the umbrella organization of all the American business, not all, 85% of the American businesses doing business in Africa. The CCA had their summit in Philadelphia just this past November, and they asked me to do a short video just to explain to their members and to anybody who would care to watch and listen why it makes sense to do business in Africa. Because Africa, really, Khalil, is the last frontier, as we say. It has enormous potential. We have all the capabilities. We have natural and physical and human resources. People just don't realize that. There's some companies which have been doing in Africa for the longest time, for decades, American companies, but it's still a well-kept secret. So I put all my heart in doing that video, which they showed at the opening, and it's called Doing Business in Africa, and I think he wanted to show some excerpts.
Yes, let's watch one excerpt, which is really where they show that Africans are really making it.
On the move, on the move.
Let's watch it.
Many countries already have impressive growth rates. Meet some of Africa's leaders. The president of Botswana, Festus Mogae.
20 years ago, Botswana was one of the world's poorest countries with a GDP per capita of only United States dollars 80 US dollars per annum. Today, largely because of diamonds, Botswana is the most prosperous non-oil producing nation in Africa with a GDP per capita of approximately 3,600 United States dollars, with a strong democracy and free, open market.
Senegal's President Abdoulaye Wade touts his nation's B+ standards in poor credit rating and invites investment in tourism and infrastructure.
Now we are working on a highway from Morocco to Mauritania and Senegal to the frontier of Mali with the objective to go through Africa.
A Pan-African highway symbolizes the trend towards stronger regional integration which favors the investment climate.
We will benefit from the economies of scales.
South African President Thabo Mbeki helped craft the continent's regional strategy, the New Africa Initiative launched in July 2001.
I must say that the sense I have around the continent is indeed, as in the South African case, a sense of hope that we might indeed have arrived at a point when the continent can turn around.
There are a lot of things we can do to help governments in Africa prepare to export their goods and services to our country.
Maybe you did this video while the project was called
the New Africa Initiative. And now it's turned into NEPAD. And let's just say quickly, Khalil, that the last person we saw there was Walter Kansteiner, who is the U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs. And I wanted to show that there's this vision from our African leaders, the political will and the vision. There's also the sense from the other side, from the American policymakers, the European also, that Africans are now very serious about their own development. And I think they realize that they have no choice but to follow the Africans in that path that they have carved for themselves. Yes. And so when we moved from the MAP and then the Omega Plan, yes, which merged to form the New Africa Initiative, and now the NEPAD, the New Partnership for Africa's Development, I think it's very important for you and I as communicators to make sure people understand on our continent and also all over the world what the NEPAD means, and to also make sure that the populations not only hear the message of the NEPAD but adhere to its goals and visions. And so in Africa Journal, I did a program on the NEPAD. I did this program earlier this year in January, and you'll be surprised. Unfortunately, that message is not heard yet.
That's true.
Yes, it is.
But you're working on that.
I'm working on it very hard.
And we're honored to really work as communicators on
Yes.
A better and a good expression of NEPAD. And let's watch an excerpt of Africa Journal by Maimouna Mills.
While we're trying to re-establish the line with Addis, let me then give it to Khalifa at DITV. Khalifa, please go ahead. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Maimouna. I also wish you the very best for the year.
Thank you. Same to you, Khalifa. Thank you very much.
Right. I have heard the answer given to the SABC gentleman, but I'm sure that many people are hearing about NEPAD in Nigeria for the first time on this program here and now. How can anyone explain that the policy would meet with its objectives within all individual countries more than any of the past policies or programs that became mere rhetoric? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Khalifa. There you go, Mr. Mokwena. What's your answer to that?
Well, as I said, we do recognize the fact that as leaders deliberate and develop strategies and programs of action, there is a period that there will be a lag between themselves and the people, and is in that regard that the leaders have directed that a detailed communication marketing strategy be developed. Let me give you an example. As you know, the Secretariat is based in Pretoria. We need to mass produce this document to the framework document, which needs to be disseminated in all centers as much as possible across the continent.
You need to shorten it first. It takes a long time to read it. And you also need to put it in layman's term, for not everybody is an economist, and not everybody, even though you started with the list of abbreviations, the acronyms, and explaining to people, it's a bit difficult to read, I have to say.
Precisely, Maimouna. Definitely. It has to be written in a simple language, as one may put it, so that it can be able to talk to the ordinary person in the street. And it's in that process that we're looking at developing brochures, we look at developing some pamphlets that can be easily accessed and distributed at relatively cost-effective way to the as wider as possible to the communities in African countries.
Yeah, and if I might add, sir, not to forget us in the broadcasting world also, and not to forget our populations which who cannot read and write, maybe radio and television programs that will make it more accessible.
So, Maimouna, I think your remark had a very positive effect because it changed the format and the way we express.
I don't want to take the credit for it, but I was happy because right after this program, I went to Johannesburg for a meeting on NEPAD. I'm actually just coming from there, and it was my great pleasure in the documentation that they distributed there so that we could discuss ways of disseminating the ideas of NEPAD, to find this beautiful brochure, which, as you can tell, is about 5 pages long.
Yes,
well, recto verso.
concise,
yes, very concise. The goals are there, the implementation mechanisms, the vision, everything. You can read it in 10 minutes, and it gives you a good sense of what NEPAD is. And this is something that you can easily distribute. You can tell it's very small and all. And also, as I was telling Mr. Mokoena, who, by the way, is the Deputy Director General of the NEPAD Secretariat, which is based in Midrand, between Pretoria and Johannesburg. As I was telling him, we also need to do more television programs, radio programs, go to the grassroots, invite everybody to join in the effort. And I think if, as much as we don't want to take the example of the European Union, we can learn from them somewhat. We need to make sure that all the pieces of the puzzle, are there. We have the heads of state, we have the political will, we have the technical people, the ministers, the steering committee in charge of NEPAD. We have us, the communicators. Yes. You have the population which is out there. We need to bring them into this dynamism.
Thank you very much for having joined English Language Magazine today.
My pleasure, Khalil, and congratulations to you. We should say that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Khalil GUEYE, and that's all for today. I'll see you next week. Goodbye.